Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at a handheld retro emulation console. This is the RG35XXH by Anbernic, and this is basically an improved version of this device here, which I actually did a video on a few years ago. So let's get it unboxed and let's see what this new version has to offer. So here's the device, and if we compare it to the last version, you can actually see that it's a little bit smaller. At first I actually thought the screen was a different resolution, but I think it's just the bezels that are slightly smaller, because when you actually look at them close up, like if I put them on this camera here, it actually looks like the screens inside are roughly identical. So before we boot it up, here's a look at how the device looks. It's really nice. It's got two really nice switch light style analog sticks at the bottom. It's got a nice set of squidgy face buttons and a nice feeling D-pad. Very clicky L and R triggers, if you listen to them now. They are very loud, which is at odds with the rest of the buttons, which are actually very soft to press. So don't play this in a quiet area, basically, if you need to use the L and R buttons, because you'll definitely hear them. But the buttons themselves are really nice. They feel good. Tiny little start and select buttons at the top as well. And if we turn it round to the back, you can see that it's got these pads on the back, which is actually exactly the same as how the previous version was too. So that's really nice. I love this see-through purple colour as well. Hopefully the camera can pick the colour up, because it looks really nice in person. And surprisingly, at the bottom here, we actually have two different micro SD slots. And it comes pre-installed, one with 128 gig and the other one with 64 gig, and the spring inside them is extremely sensitive. So I did actually pop the SD card out the other day and it just flew onto the other side of the room, so be careful with that. There's a warning if you do get one of these. And if we look at the top here, it's got a few extra buttons here. This button actually resets the game or brings up the menu in certain games. And next to that is kind of interesting. We have two different USB-C ports. I think one of them is for connecting it to a computer, so you don't need to keep taking the cards out. And the other one is actually for connecting it to a charger or to the power supply. And then most interestingly is the thing in the middle, which is a micro HDMI slot, which the previous version didn't have, so that is a great upgrade. And there's also a headphone port there in the corner as well. And on the side here we have a reset button, and we have the power button as well. Unfortunately, it's not a power switch, it's actually a button, and you do have to hold it down for quite a long time until the system decides to boot up. So literally a few seconds you need to hold it down for, which is kind of frustrating, especially if you want to turn it on and off quickly. You can't really tell whether it's actually turning on or off. And then of course it has a long load up sequence as well, which is kind of common with these sort of handhelds that don't have that much RAM or anything. So again, it's to be expected, but I wish it was faster. Like, look how long this is taking. I'm going to show this in real time as well, so you get a good idea. There we go. So now we're in the main menu, and as you can see, it's a very simple menu. I did actually change the theme a little bit, so maybe we can start with having a look through the settings. So if we take a look at the settings here, a few interesting ones. We have backlight brightness, which goes from levels 1 to 5. That's how it looks on the brightest one, and that's how it looks on the dimmest one. I think best for the video is probably a 4, so I'll leave it on there. We have I/O test, which just checks that all of the different buttons work and stuff, so seems to be all good. Oh yeah, there's a volume adjuster on this side as well, I didn't bring that up. And press start and select to exit. Date and time, all pretty standard. RetroArch settings, if you want to sort it out from here instead of in RetroArch itself. Network settings, if you want to connect it to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. I don't know what Moonlight is. Let me know if anyone knows what that option does. Icon settings, so these are the different built-in icon packs. I personally liked number 2. Well, kind of liked it. It was the best of a bad bunch, I would say, because all of these look kind of cheap and tacky, so I didn't really like any of them that much. But number 2 kind of fits the theme nicer than the rest. Background settings is a really weird one, so there's actually 4 different options here, but they all look completely random. Like, there's this really blurry picture of a bridge that's green for some reason, and then the next one up is like a picture from an airship, and then the third one is completely blank, and then the first one is like a really faded picture of some spirits. So I just decided to leave that completely empty, because I didn't really understand what any of the rest of them were. Button sound I chose to turn off because, well, let me turn the sound up and we can find out. Yeah. Really annoying, and there's actually a big delay as well from when the sound actually happens to when you're actually seeing it happen on the screen, so definitely turn the button sound off. Oh my god, I forgot about that one. Listen to this when you select a menu item. Oh, it's horrible. So turn that off and leave that off. That is my advice there. We also have buttons custom if you want to set custom control configurations. Clearing record, I guess, is just reset it to scratch. You can also shut down or reboot from there too. So that's the settings. And if we have a look across here, we have search, where of course you can just type in and search for any game, for example, Tetris, and press OK. And then you can see there's a bunch of different Tetris games. A lot of these are actually pre-installed on the console itself. So the next option across from there is history, and this is where you can reboot up any of the games that you've played previously. As you can see, I was having a lot of fun playing around with some of the different games on here. Favourites is really good as well, because this does come pre-installed with a load of different games. So if you choose your favourites, you can actually set them here to have easy access to them at any point. So now across from there, we have two different options here to access the games. We have RA game, which means that it launches through RetroArch, I think. And then we also have Game Rooms, which I presume was supposed to say Game ROMs, but they spelt it wrong. So let's start with RA game. And now for the next thing that I don't quite understand. It says external card, and then it says built-in card. But I don't really understand, because it's actually got two different external cards, and I couldn't figure out which one was referring to which. And they seem to have kind of the same list of consoles and games on as well, although there are slight differences between the two. So let's start with the external card, and we can have a look at some of the different systems and the games that are available on here. So we have PSP, Open Bore, which is kind of like indie games, I think. There was only a few on here, there's 9 to choose from, and none of them really seemed that good. Like, there was a Castlevania game here, but it was kind of weird and a bit broken. We then have Dreamcast, which actually runs surprisingly well on here, and it came with 9 games on there as well. But if we back out and go on built-in card instead, and then look at the Dreamcast, you can actually see that it's got a different list of games, and there's actually 13 on here, but about half of them actually match what's already on the other card. So again, I really don't understand how they designed this layout. Like, the PSP had 9 before, and now it's got 11 on this one, and there's a few differences and there's a few similarities. Also, the icons are a little bit strange. Some of them don't even match the right game, or some of them are like weird posters, or some of them are screenshots. So I'm not really sure what's going on there, or how it decides what to pick out from there either. The Dreamcast one works quite well. We've actually got box art for most of them, along with a screenshot of the game as well, which is pretty cool. There's also PlayStation 1 with a bunch of games here. And before we actually take a look at any gameplay, I'll just show you quickly the other systems. So there's a bunch of Capcom arcade boards, and again, random selection of games depending on which card you've selected. There's actually loads on here. There's 36 on that one. There's 30 on that one. Neo Geo, of course, the classic. Again, it's got most of the box art for the games there as well, which is pretty good. And there is a lot of Neo Geo games on here, 152. And again, if we go across, there's some more Neo Geo and arcade ones. There's a homebrew folder, which is pretty interesting, with a bunch of homebrew for a bunch of different systems pre-installed. There's Pico, which is obviously a really interesting console, and I know I've been saying this for a long time, but I want to try and look at Pico in the future. So let me know in the comments if there's any Pico 8 games that you would like me to check out. Maybe I'll do that in the future. Pokemon Mini as well, and you can see the box art for all them. And I played a few Pokemon mini games on this, and the Rumble feature is actually really good, and it actually feels kind of similar to how the Pokemon Mini felt back in the day. We have Atari. We've got Virtual Boy. I haven't tried any Virtual Boy games on here just yet, so it'll be interesting to see how they work. Game & Watch, which is pretty cool because it kind of mimics the LCD style. Game Boy Advance, of course. Famicom, which also lumps in all the NES games with it too. Super Famicom and SNES. Mega Drive. And I did actually play all the way through Rocket Knight Adventures on the Mega Drive emulator on here. We have Mega CD, we have Sega Master System, Game Gear, Game Boy Color. And I did actually put, and this is something else that's kind of frustrating, you can't actually change the layout of where these games actually show up. So somewhere in here, even though I put them at the top of the folder, there's a bunch of Pokemon ROM hacks that I added to this. And with the Game Boy one, I actually found out, oh, maybe I'm in the wrong bit, maybe you need to go in here. And this kind of shows how weird the system is. Like, there's 2 different menus to get to the same games, and some of them show a different list to the other ones. Like, if we go in Game Boy here, you can see that I tried to make a folder there called Hacks, but you can't actually use the folders. There's a bunch of games in that folder, but nothing seems to show up, so the hacks are actually just added to this list somewhere. Like if we keep pressing right here, eventually you'll get down to the Pokemon ones, eventually. And as you can see, there's hundreds and hundreds of NES games, Game Boy games on here, sorry. And they're not on there at all, they're actually in the Game Boy Color one. Or maybe they're not, maybe they're on the other card. You see, this is the confusion around using this device. There they are. So they are here, but they're not in the ROMs folder where I put them. And let's go back out into this one so you can see the rest of the options. Just skip forward to the right page. PC Engine, a great console obviously, so really happy to be able to play these on the go. PC Engine CD as well. For some reason there's only 4 to choose from there, and none of them are E's Books 1 and 2, which is disappointing. Neo Geo Pocket Color, a great little handheld. WonderSwan, again, same kind of deal with that. MSX, a Japanese computer by Microsoft that I really don't know much about at all. Nintendo DS, it'll be very interesting to see how DS games play on this. Atomiswave, Naomi, and ports, and obviously Atomiswave and Naomi are kind of Sega's arcade systems, so it's really cool to have both of them on there. And ports is kind of interesting as well. These are like PC games that have been ported to RetroArch that can actually run on this system, and they actually run surprisingly well. I was checking out that port of Outrun the other day and it works great. And then Game Rooms is kind of the same again, just with a different list and slightly less consoles for some reason. So if anyone can explain why there's 2 different lists. I think the difference is that these ones don't actually boot up in RetroArch. Like if you boot up a game from here, it actually boots up in its own emulator instead. I also found out that there's a weird omission of this as well. It doesn't have any N64 games on, whereas the one before it did. So I don't know whether you can get N64 emulators and put them on here or not. I haven't really got the time to test that out, so I'm actually just checking out what came pre-installed in this video. But it is a little surprising to see that there's no N64 when there is Dreamcast. Anyway, let's check out some games. Let's start with the PSP, and let's check out, let's see, what's a good game to test on here? Let's try Burnout Dominator. So, as you can see, there are a few little graphical glitches, but once I started playing it actually cleared up. And the frame rate's perfectly playable on here as well, which is really impressive. Like, it's definitely a lot better than the last one of these consoles that I tested. So it's great to see that they're actually putting newer chips into these. And yeah, it's a bit difficult to actually play and record and talk all at the same time, but... There are some options if you press the button at the top there, so the PSP's actually got its own emulator here with a bunch of different settings. I'm pretty happy with them all on default, but if you do want to tweak anything, you've got the option to come in here and change things like frame skipping, or whether you want upscaling or anything like that. But honestly, with the resolution of this screen, you really don't need any of these settings turned on, so it's best just to leave it as it is. It seems like it's set up quite well to just play straight out of the box. And then if you want to go back to the actual menu of the system, just press the little button there and the whole console reboots back to the main menu. You do have to wait for it to load up again, and it does take a few seconds, so it's not ideal if you want to keep swapping between games. You have to go out and then back in. There is a way to go through the menu and exit the system and then load it back up as well, but it just seems faster and easier just to press that button on the side, but you are left waiting quite a while for it to reboot every time, so it can be a little bit frustrating. So let's check out another system that generally on these kind of consoles would be kind of difficult. So, oh yeah, Dreamcast isn't actually on that list with Game Rooms. You have to go onto this one and then go across to Dreamcast. But I was really impressed. Like, let's boot up Crazy Taxi 2. I was playing this one the other night as well. It's kind of surreal seeing that Dreamcast boot up sequence on something so small and so light like this. Like, back in the day in college, I remember just seeing people having these portable Dreamcast consoles, and I always wished that I could have Dreamcast games in the palm of my hand, and now, thanks to consoles like this, it's actually become a reality, and that's pretty insane to think about, honestly. Oh yeah, the weird thing about Crazy Taxi 2, you can jump by pressing the horn. which I always thought was pretty funny. And you get money for it too. Ah, wrong way. There you go. And because this one's on RetroArch, if you press the menu button, eventually, there you go. On these kind of games, it actually boots up the RetroArch menu, so I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with this. So once you're in there, you can actually use this here to just change the games on the fly, or to change any of the settings. But again, the settings seem perfectly fine just set up by default, but if you do want to go into the core options and change everything manually, then you can. It's just playing in regular 480p, but honestly, on a screen this size, it doesn't really make any difference having it any higher than that anyway, so I'm genuinely really impressed with a lot of what this system can do. And now let's check out some of the ports, and I was really interested to see what these were like. These boot up in RetroArch as well, but these are actually PC ports of like arcade games and other computer games, and they seem to all play really well, the ones that they've chosen to go on here, so I was really happy seeing this. Right, hopefully the frame rate on the camera is good enough to pick up how smooth this looks, but it's really impressive to see this one in too. This is like a proper arcade conversion of Outrun. The music sounds great, the controls feel perfect. It's just really cool to have access to these kind of things on a device like this. And you can actually feel the rumble in this one as well, like when you're going around the corner too fast, or if you bump into another car. I could keep playing that all day, but we've got a video to make, so let's reset back to the menu. And this time I'll actually check out some of the handheld games on here as well, because I'm sure you're all interested in seeing how things like Game Boy and Game Boy Advance look, so let's check those out now. So, as you can see by default with the Game Boy Color games, the aspect ratio is actually very slightly stretched out. And in the options on the default emulator here, you can go down to Display Aspect, and you can change it from full screen to aspect. And that will actually fix it into the square that you would expect. You can also have it 1:1 as well, which makes it a little bit smaller. So you've got the option there. Or overlay as well, which actually puts a Game Boy or Game Boy Color themed border around it as well, which looks pretty cool. And you can also change a few of the display effects as well. So if you want that sort of Game Boy Color screen style, you can kind of do that. I don't know whether it picks it up too well on the camera, but I think it looks pretty nice, like if you want that sort of dot matrix display. HD doesn't seem to make any difference, and scanline in this case doesn't seem to either. So I'll just leave it on fast, that's like the default. So yeah, they look and play fine. There's nothing obviously too exciting about playing a game like that, which doesn't really push the system to its limits. And even if you do boot out through the actual in-game menu, it still takes quite a while to go back. Let's check out GBA as well, because obviously the aspect ratio for GBA games is a little bit the other way, so let's try out Crash Bandicoot for the GBA. As you can see, this one's also got an overlay in the style of the Game Boy Advance, but obviously you can just go in there and put that on full screen. And GBA actually looks really nice on this screen. This is a really nice way of playing GBA games, actually. If I go on aspect, it is very slightly taller than it is wide for Game Boy Advance games, so that means that the aspect ratio of the screens is very slightly different. So that's a 1:1 GBA screen aspect ratio, but if we change it to full, you can see that it's very slightly stretched that way, so it's a kind of odd aspect ratio for the handheld. It seems, from what I've played, it seems perfect for things like Dreamcast or PlayStation 1, and they seem to fill the screen really nice. I mean, I would be happy playing a Game Boy Advance game like this as well. You can't really tell that it's stretched much. Like, let's get into a game and have a look. I'd say this looks fine. Honestly, I'm sure the aspect ratio police will be after me, but I think it looks nice. The frame rate's really nice and smooth. No issues with latency with the controls or anything. And then let's change it back to aspect. That's how it's supposed to look. So there is a very slight difference, and probably purists would be happier playing it like this, but honestly, it plays perfectly fine for GBA, and you've got a massive selection of games right from the start. You also have things like save and load as well, so if you want to do save states, obviously you've got the option to do that. And then if I don't know, is there a pit I can jump down? There we go. And then, oh no, I died, better reload. go and load game, load up that save, and then we're straight back where we left off. So really nice and easy to use. And then if you press that again you've got the same display options again there, and the battery and the backlight brightness as well, but obviously we don't need to go into that. So now let's take a look at how the DS games play on here, and as you can see there's a big bunch of DS games already pre-installed. The one that I decided to check out was the original Animal Crossing Wild World for the DS, and it's a really interesting emulator. Basically you can either choose to see the two screens separately, or you can choose to either have the top or the bottom screen in full display, and because of the resolution it actually looks really nice on this screen. And as you can see there, you can also use the analog stick on the bottom left to move a virtual stylus as well, and then you tap the other stick in order to press down on the screen. So it works surprisingly well, and I didn't expect to be able to actually play DS games that easily on this, but I would be quite happy playing some games on here, especially if they only use one screen most of the time anyway, like Animal Crossing. You could easily play and enjoy Animal Crossing on here. And in terms of the Virtual Boy, as I expected, everything plays super nice and smooth, but unfortunately and obviously you don't get the stereoscopic 3D, so it does make playing a lot of the games kind of difficult because you don't have any depth to work with, but it's still cool to see that it's included on this system. But I was really impressed with DS, so if you're interested in playing DS games then this is actually a good way to go. So there we go, in a nutshell, that is what this new RG handheld by Anbernic has to offer. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of it. If you are interested in buying one for yourselves, then check the link down in the description below, because I have an affiliate link there to Mech DIY where you can buy this, and you can also get a bit of a discount code if you go on their site too. So thank you so much for watching, really hope you enjoyed this. If you want to see more hardware reviews like this, then check out the playlist up here, and I'll see you all again very soon for the next video. Goodbye.